They thought this was just another quiet, broken-down town, easy to bleed dry. They didn't know one of the deadliest soldiers the U.S. Army ever trained had just walked back into it, and he wasn't here to watch it die. Cole Maddox stepped off the Greyhound with nothing but a duffel bag, a Ranger tab stitched into an old field cap, and eyes that had seen too much sand, too much blood. He'd left behind the noise of war for the quiet hills where he'd grown up, a town where the loudest thing at night used to be the crickets. But something was wrong. Even before he reached Main Street, he felt it. The way people averted their eyes, the way a beat-up sedan crawled behind him for a block too long. The Ranger in him cataloged everything, 2 occupants, one with a tattoo creeping up his neck, engine idling heavy like a V8 with a bad muffler. Not locals he remembered. The storefronts told the rest of the story. The old hardware shop boarded up, the feed store is gone, and the diner, Mary's Diner, where his mother once worked, had bullet holes patched in the front glass. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee and fear. Mary wasn't there. Instead, a heavy-set man with a snake tattoo on his hand leaned on the counter, talking low to the young waitress. Cole caught just enough to understand this wasn't small-town gossip. It was a threat. "Every Friday," Snake Hand said, tapping the counter like a drumbeat, "you have my number. Don't make me remind you again." Cole slid onto a stool 2 seats down, keeping his body relaxed but his eyes locked. The man noticed. "You got a problem, stranger?" Snake Hand asked. Cole didn't blink, just wondering when this place started charging protection money for pancakes. The man smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Smart mouth gets you hurt around here." Cole's reply was flat, calm, the same tone he'd used clearing compounds in Kandahar. "Only if you're faster than me." The tension cracked like a tripwire, but the man backed away with a muttered curse. He didn't see Cole's right hand under the counter, fingers wrapped around the handle of a steak knife. Ready, unseen. The waitress leaned close after he left. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. "They'll find you." Cole gave a faint smile. "That's the idea." That night he walked the streets, silent as the shadows. Every alley, every parked car, every flicker of movement fed into the mental map forming in his head. He saw the gang's cars outside the VFW hall, now their clubhouse. He saw the flicker of a meth lab through a cracked curtain. And he saw Sheriff Daniels, once the kind of man who'd ticket you for jaywalking, sitting alone in his cruiser outside the station, staring at nothing. Daniels tried to warn him. "Cole, you don't understand. These guys, they're connected. Out-of-town suppliers, money laundering, half my deputies are scared of them." Cole leaned against the cruiser, arms folded. "Then we don't go through them. We go around. Cut the head off." Daniels shook his head. "You still think like a soldier. This isn't the battlefield." Cole's eyes hardened. "Wrong. It's exactly the battlefield. You just stopped fighting." By midnight, he'd memorized their routines, the night shifts, the drug runs, the houses they used for stash points. And he knew where he'd start. Not with the gang leader. Not yet. With a rescue. The mechanic's daughter had been taken 2 nights ago after her father refused to pay. Cole found the house she was in, a 2-story on the edge of town, windows covered, music blaring inside. He slipped into the backyard, cut the power at the breaker, and waited. Confusion inside. Yelling. Flashlight beams. Cole moved in. The first man out the back door didn't see the figure in the shadows until the chokehold cut off his breath. The second man barely raised his gun before Cole drove an elbow into his jaw, the crack echoing in the dark. He found the girl upstairs, wide-eyed, wrists bound. "Your dad sent me," he whispered. They slipped out the same way he came in, vanishing into the night before the gang even realized what happened. By morning, word was already spreading. Someone was hitting back. Cole knew it wouldn't take long before the gang came looking. He wanted them to. The town woke up tense the next morning. The mechanic had his daughter back, but the story traveled faster than the early fog rolling off the hills. People whispered about the guy who took on the gang in the dark and walked away untouched. Cole knew his name would be on their radar before noon. That was fine. He wanted them to start making mistakes. He was leaning against the weathered brick wall outside Mary's diner when the low rumble of engines broke the morning calm. 3 blacked-out pickups rolled in, chrome glinting like teeth in the sun. Cole clocked them instantly. After years of identifying hostile convoys overseas, spotting trouble was muscle memory. The lead truck's passenger door opened and Snakehand stepped out, grinning like he'd just found a lost dog. "Morning, soldier boy," Snakehand called. "Boss wants a word." Cole didn't move. "Tell your boss he can send a calendar invite." Snakehand chuckled, but the sound was ugly. "You think this is a joke? Rico Vega don't send invites. He sends body bags." The gang spread out in a half circle. Cole noted their positions, 2 flanking near the trucks, 1 on the diner's porch, 1 moving around the side, bad spacing, no overwatch, weapons printing through their hoodies. These weren't disciplined fighters. They were street muscle with delusions of battlefield dominance. Cole stepped forward, voice low. "I don't like repeating myself. You want me to meet your boss? He can come find me himself." That's when the first punch came. A sloppy right hook from Snakehand. Cole slipped it like wind around a wall, grabbed his wrist and pivoted, sending the man sprawling face first into the dirt. Another lunged with a folding knife, but Cole trapped the wrist, twisted, and drove the handle into the attacker's solar plexus before tossing the blade away. The rest froze. They weren't used to prey fighting back, much less winning. "Go home," Cole said flatly, standing over Snakehand. "And tell Rico the next time he sends a welcome party, he should send more than amateurs." They left, pride wounded, tires squealing as they roared out of town. Cole knew that small victory wouldn't scare Rico. It would just make him angry. That was good. Anger made enemies predictable. That evening, Cole sat at his kitchen table with a notepad and a hand-drawn map of the town. Every alley, every choke point, every abandoned building was a piece on the board. He marked gang movement routes, safe houses, and stash locations. He was building a picture not for a single strike, but for a sustained campaign. In the Rangers, they called it shaping the battlefield, forcing the enemy to fight on your terms, not theirs. He was going to turn this town into terrain only he knew how to navigate. By nightfall, he had his first objective, their drop-off point by the freight yard. Every Friday, a black van brought in weapons and drugs from the city. Cut that off and you choke their supply chain. Cole spent the next hour hidden in the tree line near the yard watching. 2 gang members on site, both armed, both inattentive, smoking, scrolling their phones. Amateurs again. He crept closer, staying downwind, boots silent on the damp grass. At 20 feet, he hurled a small stone at a dumpster. One of the men turned toward the sound, stepping away from the van. Cole was on him in 2 strides, arm around his throat, cutting off air until his knees buckled. The second man reached for his pistol, but Cole slammed the van door into his ribs, sending him crumpling. With the sight clear, Cole popped the van's hood and yanked the distributor cap, disabling it. He left both men zip-tied and gagged under the loading dock, alive but humiliated. When the supply van's driver called Rico to report the problem, Cole knew he'd just lit the first real fire in the man's operation. 2 nights later, Cole sat in the shadows across from the VFW hall, now the gang's command post. The American flag still hung outside, faded and tattered, but the building's purpose had been gutted. Inside, music thumped and the glow of poker tables spilled through the blinds. Cole's spotting scope, same one he'd carried in the service, tracked movement in and out. He logged faces, clothing, behavior patterns. He could already tell who was in charge of security and who was just here to drink and flex. He switched vantage points twice, careful to stay unpredictable. Surveillance was as much about avoiding detection as it was about gathering intel. If they spotted him early, his whole plan would unravel. By 1 a.m., the crowd thinned. Rico emerged, a tall, lean man in a tailored jacket, the kind of predator who hid violence behind a smile. 2 lieutenants flanked him, both armed, both scanning lazily. Cole studied their stride, their awareness levels, their tells. Rico's eyes were cold, calculating, and most importantly, arrogant. Back home, Cole drew a network diagram. Rico at the top, lieutenants beneath, crew chiefs under them, street-level runners at the bottom. He highlighted the weak links, the ones who might break under pressure or flip if scared enough. The next morning, he paid a quiet visit to one of them, Luis, a mid-tier enforcer with a gambling debt and a sick mother. Cole caught him alone behind the gas station, lit cigarette in hand. "You don't know me," Cole began, "but I know you. I know you've got problems Rico doesn't care about." Luis stiffened. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who can make your life easier if you help me, or harder if you don't." Cole's voice was calm, his gaze steady. In Ranger terms, this was a soft recon. No threats of death, just enough pressure to plant doubt. By the time Cole walked away, Luis knew someone out there was watching closely. That paranoia would spread. That night, Cole intercepted a crew running a drug drop. No gunfire, no witnesses, just 4 unconscious men found zip-tied to a streetlight by morning, their product gone. The message was clear. The town had a ghost, and he wasn't afraid of them. The next afternoon, Sheriff Daniels knocked on Cole's door. His uniform looked more like a burden than a badge now. Wrinkled shirt, weary eyes. "Cole, we need to talk," Daniels said. Cole stepped aside. "Come in. You want coffee?" Daniels shook his head. "I heard about the freight yard and the drop last night. You're poking a hornet's nest and you don't have backup." Cole leaned on the counter. "I don't need backup. I need results. This isn't Afghanistan. These people have lawyers, they've got money, and they've got friends in places I can't touch." Cole's jaw tightened. "That's the problem. You can't touch them because you stopped trying." Daniel's voice dropped. "You think I don't want them gone? I've got a wife, kids. I've seen what they do to families that stand up to them. This isn't a fair fight." Cole took a slow breath, forcing the old frustration down. "I didn't come back here looking for a fight, Dan, but I'm not going to watch them choke this town to death. You can either help me or get out of my way." There was a long silence before Daniels spoke again. "You're going to get yourself killed." Cole's answer was flat. "Then I'll die on my feet, not on my knees." When Daniels left, Cole knew the sheriff wasn't ready to commit, but the seed was planted. Fear could be beaten. Sometimes it just needed a spark. That night, Cole started working on his next move. He knew Rico's operation relied on fear and visible control. Break that image in public and cracks would form fast. His plan: hit one of Rico's high-profile parties, the kind where half the town's compromised elite showed up to mingle with criminals. Slip in, cause disruption without ever being seen, and let the rumor mill do the rest. Because in war, whether overseas or on your own doorstep, half the battle is making the enemy feel hunted. Friday night, the mansion on the edge of town was lit like a beacon. Rico's party had the usual suspects, politicians pretending they weren't shaking hands with gangsters, local business owners hoping to stay on the safe side, and plenty of street muscle watching the gates. Cole approached from the tree line, dark clothing blending into the night. His movements were fluid, deliberate, every step placed to avoid dry leaves, every shadow exploited. He didn't need to be inside to cause damage. He just needed to be close enough to influence the chaos. First, he cut the power to the main gate by snipping a buried cable, timed so the security lights flickered, drawing attention from the guards. While they scrambled to check fuses, he slipped a small gas canister under the back porch. Nothing lethal, just enough CS gas to get people coughing and stumbling. Inside, the coughing started, guests moved toward the exits, guards got distracted, and in that confusion, Cole's real objective walked out the back door. Marisol Vega, Rico's niece. Not a willing player in the family's business, she'd been held close as a pawn to keep certain cartel allies happy. Cole's approach was fast, one hand over her mouth to stifle sound, the other guiding her into the tree line before she could panic. Only when they were 50 yards out did he release her, speaking in a calm, clipped voice. "I'm not here to hurt you. Your uncle is using you as leverage. I'm getting you out." She hesitated but nodded. Fear and relief wrestled in her eyes. "You'll never get away with this. He'll come for me. He already will, but you won't be here when he does." Cole had a safe spot ready, a storm cellar beneath an abandoned barn, stocked with water and blankets. He left her there with instructions to stay quiet until sunrise. By the time Rico's men realized she was missing, they were too busy controlling the chaos at the mansion. And when word spread that someone could walk into one of Rico's strongest points and take family without firing a shot, the myth of his untouchability took its first serious hit. The morning after the party, the streets were tense. Black SUVs prowled like sharks, and every corner boy had orders to watch for strangers. Cole knew they'd tighten their perimeter, but that only made them easier to predict. Rico reacted exactly as Cole hoped, angry and overconfident. He put a $50,000 bounty on Cole, offering cash to anyone who could give up his location or bring him in alive. Flyers went up in the worst parts of town with a grainy photo of him from the diner's security camera. Cole studied one of the flyers, smirking at how little they knew about him. Alive meant they wanted to make a spectacle of him, break him in public to scare anyone else from standing up. That arrogance was a weapon, and he planned to turn it against them. He started with misdirection. At night, he left false trails, boot prints leading toward abandoned buildings, cigarette butts planted where he never stayed, even a ranger coin left under a broken window to make them think they'd missed him by minutes. Meanwhile, he kept the pressure on, disabling vehicles in their motor pool, cutting their radio antennas, and replacing their stash of meth with bags of sugar. Each hit forced Rico to spread thinner, pulling men off patrols to guard resources. That's when Cole struck where they'd least expected. Broad daylight on Main Street. He intercepted two of Rico's top lieutenants walking into a pawn shop. In a move as quick as it was silent, he shoved one into the alley, dropping him with a strike to the throat. The other tried to pull a pistol, but Cole disarmed and floored him in two moves, zip-tying his hands before anyone outside realized what happened. The message wasn't just that he could reach them anywhere, it was that he could humiliate them without ever firing a shot. By sundown, paranoia was setting in. Rico doubled the bounty. Cole smiled. That meant the clock was ticking faster. Cole knew brute force alone wouldn't dismantle Rico's empire. He needed to fracture it from within. In the Rangers, they called it information dominance. On the streets, it was simply mind games. He started feeding false intel to the weakest links, whispering to one crew that another was plotting to overthrow them, leaving cryptic notes at stash houses implying a mole was leaking to the feds. Within days, gang members were accusing each other, weapons drawn in heated arguments. Next, he cut power to 3 of their safe houses in one night, plunging them into darkness right as unmarked cars happened to drive past. Cars driven by townsfolk Cole had convinced to help, just enough to keep the fear alive. He also planted sound devices, cheap Bluetooth speakers playing footsteps, whispers, or faint radio chatter inside their hangouts. The paranoia skyrocketed. Men started refusing night duty. To tighten the noose, Cole staged a fake cartel incursion. Using scavenged uniforms and markings from his service days, he hit one of Rico's warehouses hard. Quick breach, flashbangs, masked appearance, then gone. He left behind spray-painted warnings in Spanish. La deuda vence pronto. The debt comes due soon. The beauty was that none of it pointed directly to him. To the gang, it looked like rivals were moving in. Rico, furious, started pulling. Men from outer areas to protect his inner circle, leaving whole neighborhoods unguarded. Cole used that opening to quietly train small groups of locals in defensive tactics, how to spot surveillance, how to respond if approached, even basic room-clearing drills. It wasn't about turning them into soldiers, it was about giving them back the confidence the gang had stolen. Rico's grip was loosening, and for the first time, Cole could see the fear in the man's eyes during his public appearances. The predator was starting to feel hunted. Cole knew Rico's empire wouldn't collapse just from fear. It needed a decisive blow that would take out multiple lieutenants at once. That meant baiting them into the perfect kill zone. He chose the old McKinley textile mill, shuttered since the late 80s, 2 stories of rusting steel and broken windows with a maze of interior hallways and catwalks that would confuse anyone unfamiliar. He'd played in it as a kid. Now he was turning it into a fortress. Over 2 nights, Cole prepped the building, tripwire noise traps made from fishing line and cans, choke points narrowed with debris to force single-file movement, escape routes only he could navigate, high ground shooting positions with clear lines of sight. Then he leaked word, through the same channels he'd been manipulating, that he'd be meeting a cartel contact at the mill to discuss a buyout of Rico's territory. Rico's response was predictable. He sent 2 of his lieutenants with a crew of 12 men to handle it. They arrived just after sunset, flashlights cutting through the dust. Cole, watching from the catwalk, counted their entry points. 3 teams, poorly coordinated. The first team tripped a noise trap. In the momentary confusion, Cole dropped 2 smoke grenades into the main floor, cutting visibility to nothing. The men fired blindly, the sound echoing like a war zone, but Cole was already flanking. Moving low, controlled breaths, he took out the first man with a suppressed pistol shot to the leg, non-lethal but enough to drop him screaming. Another came to help, only to get clotheslined with a length of rope Cole had tied between 2 posts. By the time the smoke cleared, 4 were down, the others disoriented and panicking. Cole's voice rang out from the shadows. "You came for me. I'm still here. How many more do you want to lose?" They dragged their wounded out, leaving the lieutenants exposed. Cole dropped from the catwalk, disarmed 1 in a blink, and zip-tied them both before sending them staggering out the door with a single warning: "Tell Rico the mill is mine now. He steps foot here, he won't walk back out." The ambush worked. Rico's chain of command was rattled, and his men were starting to refuse missions involving Cole's name. Sheriff Daniels showed up at Cole's door that night, eyes heavy but different this time, more resolved. "You made a mess at the mill," he said. Cole poured him a coffee. It was a message. Daniels took a slow sip. "And now the town's split. Half the folks think you're a hero. The other half are scared you're going to get them killed." Cole leaned forward. "I can't do this alone forever, Dan. At some point, you have to decide. Are you going to enforce the law or just keep pretending there's nothing you can do?" Daniels looked away. "You don't know what it's like, living every day knowing they could put a bullet in your kid's head." "I do," Cole said quietly. "It's called deployment. The difference is, there, I had a mission. Here you have a community depending on you. Are you willing to die for it?" The silence stretched. Then Daniels exhaled. "If I step in, I can't step back. You understand that?" Cole nodded. "Once we start, we finish." That night, Daniels called in the few deputies he still trusted. No uniforms, no squad cars, just quiet conversations in back rooms, laying out plans to cut off Rico's influence. They'd start with the local judge known to rubber stamp gang-friendly warrants and work their way outward. It wasn't much, but it was the first time in years that law enforcement in this town was actually working toward justice instead of survival. Rico didn't take the losses quietly. He fortified his compound on the edge of town, a converted trucking yard surrounded by shipping containers stacked 3 high, floodlights on every corner, guards on rotating shifts. Cole studied it for 2 days, noting patterns. Guards smoked in pairs, blind spots existed between certain container stacks, and the main gate relied on a single keypad entry. He'd need to breach fast, neutralize resistance, and reach Rico before the man could escape. Using scavenged breaching charges, more noise than destruction, he set up at the west entrance just before midnight. The explosion rattled the containers, drawing guards away from the east side, where Daniels and his 2 trusted deputies cut through a fence. Cole moved like water, 2 guards down with quick strikes, another dropped with a chokehold. Inside, the compound was chaos. Shouts, gunfire, floodlights swinging wildly. He pushed toward the main office container where he knew Rico would be holed up. Kicking in the door, he found him with a pistol in one hand, a phone in the other. "You're making a mistake, soldier," Rico snarled. "You think you're saving this town? You're just killing it slower." Cole stepped forward, weapons steady. "I'm not here to debate philosophy." Rico raised his gun, but Cole was faster. 1 shot to disarm. Then they were on each other in a brutal hand-to-hand fight. Rico was bigger, but Cole was trained. Every movement was calculated. Elbow strikes, knee drives, knife defense. When Rico finally went down, coughing blood, Cole stood over him. "This is my town, not yours." Daniels entered, cuffs in hand. For the first time, the sheriff looked like the law again. Rico was bleeding from a split lip, still breathing hard from the fight. Cole kept his pistol low but ready. He'd learned long ago never to assume a man was beaten until he was restrained. Daniels slapped the cuffs on, but Rico's eyes stayed locked on Cole's. "You think putting me in a cell fixes this?" Rico sneered. "My people will still be out there. They'll still run this place." Cole crouched down, voice cold as winter steel. "Your people only follow you because they think you can't be touched. Tonight they watched me walk into your fortress and put you on the ground. That illusion's gone." The words hit harder than the punches had. Rico didn't reply. They marched him out through the compound where the last of his crew had been rounded up by Daniels' deputies. The younger gang members looked shaken, muttering among themselves. But Cole knew this wasn't over. Power vacuums could be dangerous. When one predator fell, another often rose to take their place. That's why his next move mattered as much as the fight itself. On the ride back to town, Cole called the U.S. Marshals Service using a number he'd memorized from his Ranger days. Rico wouldn't just face local charges, they'd dig up his federal ones too. That way, he wouldn't be back on the street in 6 months with a better lawyer. When they rolled into the sheriff's office, a small crowd had gathered. No one cheered, they were too stunned, but there was a quiet, collective exhale. For the first time in years, Rico Vega wasn't the one holding the town's throat. By dawn, word had spread through every street, every diner booth, every shop corner. Rico was in custody and his compound was in pieces. Cole didn't expect gratitude, he expected skepticism. People had learned not to believe good news until it stuck. But that morning, something shifted. The mechanic whose daughter Cole had rescued stopped by his porch, dropping off a box of fresh tools. "Figured you might need these more than me," he said, a quiet respect in his voice. At the diner, the waitress who once warned him to leave served him breakfast without a word, but her eyes said enough. Across the room, 2 old men who used to avoid talking about the gang were now discussing the arrest openly. Even Daniels seemed lighter. He'd spent the morning speaking with business owners about reopening, fixing damage, and, most importantly, standing together. Cole walked the streets and saw boarded windows being pried open, kids riding bikes where they'd once been told to stay inside. Fear was still there, but it was retreating. That evening, Cole called a town meeting at the community center. People filled the seats, hesitant but present. He stood in front, hands resting on the podium, and spoke plainly. This town didn't need me to fight for it. It needed to remember it could fight for itself. Rico's gone, but there will always be someone who thinks they can take what's ours. The difference is, next time, they'll have to go through all of us. It wasn't a grand speech, but it didn't need to be. People nodded, some clapped. The seed of resistance was already growing. Cole had planned to leave. He'd done it before, drop into hostile territory, complete the mission, move on. That was the Ranger way. But as he packed his duffel, he looked out at Main Street and saw something different this time. The town wasn't back to normal. It never would be. But it was breathing again, and part of him wondered if walking away now would just invite the next Rico to move in. Daniels stopped by that afternoon. "Heard you were thinking about heading out," the sheriff said. Cole shrugged. "My fight's done." "Is it?" Daniels asked. "You built something here. Not just fear in the gangs, hope in the people. If you leave now, that fades." Cole didn't answer right away. He wasn't a mayor, wasn't a community leader, but he was someone who knew how to keep predators at bay. Maybe that was enough. That night, Cole walked the length of town in the dark, noting weak points, places where better lighting could go, spots where a patrol would deter trouble. By the time he got home, the decision was made. Staying didn't mean fighting every battle himself. It meant preparing the town to fight its own. Cole began training small volunteer groups in the basics: situational awareness, defensive positioning, communication under pressure. He taught them how to move in pairs, how to recognize surveillance, and how to respond without escalating unnecessarily. He worked with Daniels to set up a discreet neighborhood watch network, not just folks with binoculars, but people willing to coordinate if trouble ever returned. Some nights he'd take a few locals out to the abandoned mill, walking them through its hallways, showing them how to use cover and concealment. They weren't soldiers, and he didn't want them to be, but they learned enough to make it clear to any outsider: this town wouldn't roll over again. Word spread beyond the county. Criminal crews that once saw the town as an easy mark started hearing a different story about a place where gangs went in and didn't come back out the same. Months later, Cole stood on Main Street at sunrise, coffee in hand. The light was soft, casting long shadows that stretched across clean sidewalks. The air smelled like fresh bread from the reopened bakery. The town wasn't perfect. He still caught whispers about old loyalties and quiet deals, but it was alive again. Kids laughed in the park. The diner had its original glass back. Daniels wore his badge with purpose now. Cole knew threats would come again. They always did. But he also knew this place wasn't defenseless anymore. He thought about the wars he'd fought overseas, about the brothers he'd lost there. They had fought for freedom in far-off places. Here, he had fought for it on his own doorstep. As the sun broke fully over the horizon, Cole allowed himself a rare, small smile. Some battles you win with bullets. Others you win by making sure the enemy never dares to return. And this was one of those victories worth keeping.